Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Widow's Peak, designed by Oliver Clegg for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons Andrew, Brian, and Richard, and gold patrons RPG Papercrafts and Brian. Thank you all very much for your support. So, of the official Wizard of the Coast adventures that I have read but not run or played in, Curse of Strahd definitely ranks up there. It's probably my overall favorite. It's the classic horror module. It's super thematic. It's got a great villain. It's got a good balance between like an open world design but within a limited space, which isn't as intimidating as something like Storm King's Thunder for a DM to run, for example, but still gives the players enough freedom there, and then kind of ends in a nice big dungeon crawl at the end, which is how a lot of Tomb of Annihilation is structured, which we're playing right now. This adventure, Widow's Peak, is very much, I feel like it's very much inspired about how Curse of Strahd is structured. Obviously, it is a horror adventure, definitely a horror-themed adventure, but it is structured in a way that makes it more of like giving you a miniature open world to explore with like a bunch of different areas on a map, rather than a linear story-driven adventure. And I like that, as long as you realize you're not maybe going to get the most carefully constructed story arc out of it. Widow's Peak is designed for adventures for characters of 5th level and above, specifically mentions 5th and 10th level. It does take place in Ravenloft, within a demi-plane of Ravenloft, I believe, because Ravenloft is all about these kind of isolated areas that you can't really escape, which is a very classic horror theme. You have to deal with the trauma that's present there with the people or the monsters and whatever. And in this case, they just kind of arrive at this seaside land. It's not even just a village. It's like an area. I can show you that map in a second. And they just they get an overarching story about a witch that was killed, burned at the stake by the people, and she cursed the town and made this town barren. And it even mentions up here, isn't it? The witch is dead. Before she died, she cursed the town of Widow's Peak to be barren and lifeless until the sea swept it away. Hurled into the devastation as the final stages of the curse take hold, can our characters hold back the tide, or will the waves wear them away to nothing? I really, really like the writing here. I'm going to show you some examples as we go through it. It's extremely evocative and immersive writing style, and I absolutely adore it, including all the little, flavorful bits that the DM is meant to read to the players. I think are absolutely outstanding. The level range, it's solidly tier 2. The end is bananas in terms of the threats the player has to face, although there are mentions about the fact that this is way too hard of a threat, and here's how players could, come up with that, and here's how DMs can run it to make it suitably epic, which I like that. There's a moment in Storm King's Thunder, for example, when a Kraken attacks, and if the players aren't meant to fight the Kraken, they're just supposed to, get the hell out of there. And I think this could be used in a similar situation to be pretty fun, but otherwise I don't expect the players are actually supposed to level that much during this adventure, so I'm not sure. Just, if you want to make it harder, then you have it at a lower level. In terms of slotting it in, though, obviously Curse of Strahd, you could slot this in very easily. If you wanted to just insert a horror-themed adventure, because of the way the Ravenloft stuff works, you just, that classic, like the mist rolls in, your characters are teleported. That's how all these things start, is they're just teleported into these horror zones. So you could technically insert it, but otherwise it is a self-contained, demi-plane that your characters arrive at. And the way it's organized, you can see up here, it's by chapter. There's a prologue and then 9 chapters. So you get a pretty good, I think it's like 40 pages. This is a very meaty adventure. And the chapters make it feel like it's, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So it's like, here's what they do first, then this is what they do, then this is what they do. But that's not actually at all how it's structured. This is meant to be more like in Storm Kings or Tomb of Annihilation, where it just mentions like areas and like here's what happens in those areas. That's actually how it's organized here. There's not really a clear linear line between the events. It's just, hey, here's this map with some notable locations, and here's what happens at each location. Which I like that design, because then it puts the onus on the DM to create that connective tissue between the events. So you have to actually create an ongoing story. And there are events here. There are literally events listed at different locations. There are NPCs that show up at multiple locations to kind of guide a little bit of a story here, but I feel like the overarching story, I hate to say falls apart, because that makes me sound a little too critical, but the twist here is that the witch is dead. The curse is real, but there is no actual like evil force doing anything. It's just that the townsfolk murdered this witch. She cursed them to where they can't make babies, and this place is slowly dying. And the way that it's resolved is you can either turn a player character evil to become the new Dark Lord of this zone, which I have very big thoughts about that, or there is a celestial here who's in charge of a carnival who can be either tainted by evil or can help save the characters from literally just the world collapsing because it has no Dark Lord in charge. Which all of those things can equal some really fun endings, and it's basically just up to the DM to decide which one would work better for their group and which kind of event is the best. So I feel like that works pretty well, but in terms of like a satisfying story, I'm not sure this actually does that very well. Like it's very well written. Each area feels very nice. It's almost like playing a Dragon Quest game, where each area just has like a localized thing that you need to take care of, and then you're kind of moving on from there. But in terms of like, you're not really saving anything or doing anything. You're just kind of trapped in this shitty scenario, and your whole goal is either to escape or just everybody dies. Which, I mean, maybe that's part of just a horror thing, is survival is basically the biggest thing. But I feel like in a lot of the best horror stuff, there's people like working through trauma or solving some kind of problem or doing something proactive, and I feel like that's just kind of missing here. But I do love the way it's structured and organized. So the introduction just explains Craven Cove, which is the area, and it's very, I like the way that it's specifically mentioned about how to tailor things. So for example, cosmetic changes like Find Familiar manifests as a seagull. If you cast Find Steed, then that creates a dolphin floating in the water. There's a really cool combination of the ocean as this evil, foreboding, dark force that's terrifying, and then obviously just classic horror stuff in general. And I feel like those things mesh really, really well here. And it's also reflected in the random encounters, which is a big pro that I've got for this area. Let's see where. Okay, so we explain the areas of Craven Cove. Here's the actual map, and you can see it's a pretty good-sized area that we cover, and every single one of these basically gets its own little. Again, it's very similar to like in Tomb of Annihilation, just the most recent one that I've really looked at in depth. But it's kind of like just here's all the locations, and some of these are mini dungeons. Some of them are just kind of like one little event that happens. None of them are big dungeon crawls, I'll say that. There is no like big mausoleum or anything like that. There is one like smaller tomb, but they're all kind of like 1 to 3 room dungeons, if anything. So it really is meant to be more of this overworld travel, and you're just kind of hitting all these spaces, which is fine. I think that can be really fun. And the encounters that players can get on this map are extremely cool. They're not just like 3d6 zombies or whatever. They're like really, really interesting stuff. And you can see here's all the encounters. Very few of them are like just a straight up monster, like the sea spawn hulking crab, but some of these are fantastic. There's an awakened willow tree that can just comes alive and attacks you. An ambient curse, which just can curse characters if they fail a wisdom saving throw. And the flavor text is incredible here. The air chills and an ill wind passes over you. You have the uncomfortable feeling that someone just walked over your grave. Like I can't not say that in a fucking cool voice. Creaking into your path, a blackened willow stalks towards you. Its branches reach for you like claws, and the leaves whisper maliciously. That's fantastic. I love that. And almost every single encounter or event or area has some kind of just amazing the yawning chasm. There's this broken up this chasm leading into the darkened void. The land is rent apart by a gigantic split in the earth, surrounded by blackened soil. A fall into a drop that steep could be deadly. No light or hope shines at the bottom of the chasm. I love it. I love the writing is absolutely fantastic here. And yeah, so these random encounters are just absolutely fantastic as well. They can find a treasure chest just full of a swarm of ravens, cultists dressed in the robes that are sacrificing people. All this shit is great. Just rain that rains for days. Really, really good stuff all around. And it's done to where each one of these has a little paragraph explaining like how exactly this event happens and what this is, which is also really cool. Like I was really impressed with how. Usually when people give you like a random encounter chart, it is just that. It's like, okay, here's some kind of like, vaguely thematic monster threat that can appear. But this is almost every single one of these is like a mini event in of its own, which is very, very nice. So we go to the chapters, and each chapter is literally just a location. It describes that location and what's going on there, with obviously the biggest location being the town. The town is very creepy. The players have to learn. They basically just learn about all the locations on that map that we just saw. They can learn all the things in the area. There's there's a creepy lighthouse. There's a creepy ghost ship. There's a creepy carnival. You're sensing a theme here, right? There's a witch on the house on the cliff that we killed because she was super awful, which is a lie. Of course, the witch was, a friendly like midwife who knew like herbs and stuff, but she was a knowledgeable woman in this time, and she had to be burned. There's not actually that much danger or horror in the town itself. It's actually kind of a safe place, surprisingly. And they learn the most notable character is the actual daughter of the witch, who surprisingly is just basically a normal person, Amelia, serious and earnest. And she kind of explains the witch's curse and is basically just telling the players, hey, can you free us from the curse, which is kind of their main quest. But as I mentioned, they can't actually complete this quest. They can explore the witch's hut for sure, and in fact they can go there right away if they want to, but there's nothing actually there. Like, well, we'll get to that, but it just feels almost like the whole witch thing is like a red herring to just... The main purpose of this entire adventure is just to explore every thing that's here, but if the players get this main quest and then kind of get you just need to have your players that kind of like, okay, let's just explore around and do all the things. If they're into that and you can make it so that there are things there, then fine. What I was hoping for is to really get some quest hooks and not just mentions of locations. Like if you find yourself in fucking Hellsville Horror Town, like, why would you go anywhere? Like, you need that classic, like, Silent Hill, like, I'm searching for, someone that matters to me, and I need to find them. Like, I feel like there needs to be just a few more good quest hooks, and I guess, help, save us from the witch is your one quest hook, but I don't know if there's enough to encourage the players to go to all these other locations, and I want them to, because these are good locations to go to. And then every other... So the artwork is kind of weird here. There's a lot of... I don't know if the author just kind of found these images they wanted to use. There actually is a Sharknado later on that you could possibly use, which, again, I get that horror can be darkly humorous at some points. It kind of skirts that line very carefully in some instances, but I'm not too keen on the actual pictures that are used. And then, yeah, there's some events that can be mentioned that, I think these are the town events. As I said, every location has specific events that can happen. So in this case, it's like ghosts in the town, or a gull speaker, which is this creepy old man. It's like, feed the birds, and this swarm of gulls, like, is all around him. Like, that's a really cool... It's a cool idea for a monster. And again, it gets that theme of the ocean as a source of horror, which I think is really cool. And then, so each chapter is just a different location. So there's the lighthouse, which people have seen picture like from the window, like a man and his child, which everybody's like, there's not been a child here in like decades because of the curse, so something's up there. And you go there and it's an Ooblex, which I believe is a recent creature just added from Mordenkainen's Tomb of Foes, which is like this ooze that can manifest itself as people. Like, it kind of has a disguised tactic. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's a really interesting, very horror-themed creature, so that's a neat thing. And it's got a fire elemental trapped as the actual upstairs lighthouse thing. The players can... Which, the weird thing there is if the players free the fire elemental and let it burn the lighthouse to the ground, that's considered a corruption point. Now, corruption, I haven't gone over this yet, is an optional mechanic you can use in this adventure that essentially tracks the evil things that any kind of player character can do. And at the end of the adventure, the darkness is supposed to offer the characters to become the new Dark Lord of this domain, and it offers it to the person with the most corruption. And corruption mechanically is supposed to weigh you down, which I like that idea, but my player, we never use encumbrance, so that would kind of not work. But it literally, every point of corruption is 50 pounds, which I like the fact that evil's weighing you down. I have, very mixed thoughts about anything that makes players turn on each other, and it does mention the fact that, if you're not comfortable with that, then just don't use that mechanic. So it's definitely not necessary. It is purely optional. I'd be very, very wary about doing anything that would end up with the players turning on each other at the end. But it could be an interesting climax and end for a party if that happens. My problem is this is not an adventure that starts at level 1 and is the sole career of your adventurers. They start at 5th to 10th level. So by now your character's been playing together for long enough to get decently attached. If you're the kind that are okay with this, then that sounds like it could be cool. I would in no way invoke that concept at all unless there was some way to free that player, or something. Or you really had a discussion with your players about hey, is this okay if some of you could turn evil to doing evil tasks? Make some kind of hints there, because I don't know about that. Having a climax where players beat it, and literally it's not even the player explodes into a kraken at the end that the players have to fight. So it's crazy. I'll just go over real quick all these different areas. The Wailing Stone is a banshee lair with a roper in this river. Again, pretty short. I like the just aesthetic design of isometric maps. I love them. I think they're really fun to look at. They are not functional whatsoever. You can glance at it and see okay, I know the general layout, which is great, but in terms of an actual battle map you can use, I can't use that at all. And I hate to constantly complain about maps in all of my reviews because it's getting to be quite a trend now. It wasn't the case, just kind of the luck of the draw of the string of adventures I've been looking at, including Dragon Heist, is just a dearth of just quality grid battle maps. And I do love this. I hate to complain about it because I like seeing these a lot. I love this style map. But what I also want is a separate, handout of a grid map, ideally with some color and some detail, enough to where I can use it in something like Roll20 or just as a battle map or something like that. And unfortunately this has none of that. I think the closest we got was maybe this lighthouse design right here is a grid map, which again, that's not, I believe this does not come with separate player handouts at all, so it's not terribly useful again there. So that is a bummer that I constantly have to put that as a con on all these reviews, is the maps. I like my maps. I like that there's mini dungeons here. There's not a super big dungeon crawl. I kind of wish there was something along those lines, but there's not. Chapter 4 is a vampire lair, which is kind of similar to the one we just saw. This one again has the same kind of cool isometric, which it looks really awesome. That looks cool as hell. I just can't use that as an actual battle map. This one is a cool twist that has a backstory that I don't know if you'd ever actually figure out, but this vampire just wasted away because he fell in love with a human that he didn't actually want to eat or drain or whatever, and turned into just a vampire mist, which is a vampire that's just permanently in its mist form, which is a cool idea. And unless it's killed by sunlight, it just regenerates every day and then hunts the players down if they actually come to its lair. But it has a lot of magical artifacts the players can get here, which is pretty neat. The Grey Gardens also has a cool backstory that I don't know if you would actually learn about, where the stone giant, you find there's a stone giant statue somewhere in that open world map, and then you find his mate, her mate, here in the Grey Gardens, which he's been cursed with this mirror that he can't look away from because it shows his wife and him as happy and together. And this one woman was able to reflect this curse that came off, which turned everybody to stone. She was turned into a Medusa, because that fits the theme pretty well. And again, it's just kind of a mini... It's actually not even a dungeon. This is literally just the Medusa's lair. It's just this one room area, which is actually not even a hostile encounter. If the players don't antagonize her, they can just talk to her and get some information. Obviously, they can then just kill her and take her stuff, I guess. Although you get, again, a point of corruption if you're using that. The party kills Eddie despite her attempts to avoid them. So she's actually not hostile. Neat area. This is weird because it's like a mini overland map within an overland map. Without, again, really dungeon here. I don't know if there's specific random encounters in here. I guess not. Do you think there would be? But there are, well, yeah, okay, so there are things that happen here. Galabdors are there. A wraith chasing Amelia can happen. Events are pretty good. They just give you examples of like NPCs or things that can happen to bring more flavor to the world, or in some case, kind of semi-important story moments. Although, again, I don't feel like they really go anywhere. I don't know if Amelia isn't really used like I thought she would be used, other than just being like the one good character in this adventure. The carnival is given a lot of flavor and information and NPCs. It's that classic, like, fucked up carnival, although it's actually not that evil. And in fact, the backstory here, and again, there's a lot of backstory with all these events, but it just doesn't tie into like the current story. I don't know how much the players would learn about it. Is that this carnival is actually led by a celestial, a good celestial called Isolde, who travels like between the planes, and she just kind of is a good person that actually legitimately wants to bring goodness to the area around her. And then, although the people working for her are not very good people, and in fact they're affected by this twisting, which is this neat mechanic that transforms people's inner personalities and quirks and traits into their outward appearance. So you've got a lot of just fucked up people, essentially. And there is a lot of information about these characters. It is a huge area. There's this man with glowing tattoos. There's a professor who has these what look like fetuses in jars. There's a funny sentence on here. Let's see. Offers them at reasonable prices. Eating a pickled punk can have miraculous effects, depending on the particular punk he has pickled. To pick a pickled punk, you might perhaps prefer to peruse the pots the punks are pickled in. The powers that a punk provides are presented practically in parallel. Clever. Very clever. If you make an adventure fun to read for a DM, that's always going to get you points from me. I appreciate that quite a bit. In addition to just the flavor text and stuff, that's just something that a DM's just going to read and can smile and be like, all right. And Isolde is actually a very important character to this story, and she's not even here. She just shows up at the witch's hut near the end, and then shows up at the cultist lair at the end. So you're just supposed to kind of learn about her and not actually talk to her yet, I believe. Otherwise, there's actually not much going on at the carnival. There's just kind of... It's just a chance for your characters to walk around and talk to people and have just kind of fucked up like dialogue sessions, I think. The one important thing is this professor character is kind of trying to rebel against Isolde, and actually has a like cage, which is a bracelet artifact that can hold Isolde. And that can be very useful because at the end of the campaign you could do the ending where Isolde is the one that's corrupted and is like, oh, I can take the place of the Dark Lord. And then that device would prove exceedingly useful. And what's funny is, as a DM, you could offer that to the players, and they'll be like, "Oh no, we don't want to do that to this. We don't want to take that." And then they could think back and be like, "Oh shit, we should have taken that." Let's see. Chapter 7, the house on the hill, is the actual witch's hut, which doesn't have a lot going on for it. There are some like wood creatures. There's an active curse, which just comes down to constant, huge necrotic damage, 5d10 every turn, that the players have to avoid while exploring this area. And they said, you can use a familiar or a creature to scout it. You can somehow get immediate necrotic damage. The one thing is that the masks that these little Skura use, which are the Vishtani, there's kind of a sample picture. Any kind of humanoid that wears these masks that actually that can actually render you immune to curses. So that could be the one important reason you go to the carnival, and I would definitely play that up as like something the character, like, you notice everybody's affected by this curse except for them, and you learn about the masks, and there is mechanics for crafting masks, which is good. So there is an in-game way to doing that, and I would make that part of like the main quest. It's like, you need to go to this carnival, you need to get the masks, so you can go to the witch's hut. The weird thing is, there is no witch here. Like, the witch has not returned, she's still dead, the curse is just still active. The only thing that happens is Isolde shows up which only occurs if you have not met Isolde, which I don't think they do unless they do this, which the angel just shows up and says, yeah, the villagers just killed this. It just feels weird because it's like the players just showed up at the same time Isolde, I guess, has shown up. Oh no, it says she's been there for a while. I don't know why she just now decided to do this. If the carnival's been there for a while, then why does Isolde just now show up at the witch's hut and be like, oh, this is how evil people were. They burned this poor lady and we're going to go kill them. Are you with me? And you're like, okay, yeah. And then you go and that kind of renders the entire layer dungeon moot, which is this last area, Angard's Teeth, which is this classic like evil ritual chamber, just full of cultists, led by an archdruid and some of those cool gold speakers. But yeah, if she's there, then I believe she's just killed everyone. Which, if that happens, I believe then you can transition into the fact that she is going evil, because she's like, how many lives can I save? Only more proactive. And then this storm occurs, which the storm is like the entire place collapsing and ending. And then you have to make the choice as the DM whether to do three things. Either a player can become evil, which is using that optional corruption mechanic, and you just want to have one player turn on the other team and be evil. And then that player explodes into a kraken. And fuck me, you have to fight a kraken at level 5 to 10. Although you do have the celestial on your side, presumably. So that makes a big difference. So that could be a really neat encounter, but I would be very wary about doing that. Or you choose Isolde choosing darkness, which is she becomes evil, which she is a freaking, CR 21 whatever celestial angel, which can be a bitch of a fight. Or nobody chooses evil. And what I would do if I were running it is probably just have it open to where everybody has this option, and Isolde is like, oh, and have this where Isolde is being turned, but the players have a chance to pull her back from it through like some kind of good checks and good role playing and all that. That's how I would do it. So I would basically do the Isolde choosing darkness, but not make it a cutscene. Make it like give the players a chance, and then if they fail that chance, then you do Isolde chooses darkness, and if they succeed, then you do the darkness is denied. That's how I would run it, which is nobody accepts being the evil person, and the entire place just collapses. Like, it's just because there's no Dark Lord here, this place is just going to hell, literally. And then it seems like a pretty cool event. You essentially have to rush to the carnival because the carnival has the ability to just kind of teleport between worlds. And you're being chased by the King of Ghouls, a manifestation of the domain's dying malevolence, which is a rock with a swarm of ghouls. And apparently you can throw a Sharknado in there just for funsies, which I probably would because that's fun. I do like that it mentions this isn't a fair fight if you actually do the Kraken or Isolde as boss fights, but it does say like a party of level 10 is very capable of outputting enough damage to take them down. That's true, but you also said this is level 5 to 10 adventure, so if you start at 5, are you meant to get to 10 by the end of this adventure? There's no freaking way, so I don't agree with that statement. If you're going to say that, then say this is a level 10 adventure. Don't put the level range in there. It does mention the location of the fight is up to you. Like, there are things you can do to make this a decent fight. Obviously, I'm glad this is mentioned here. Obviously, a good DM would be able to work with that and not be an instant game over just because through no fault of the players. Like, there's not something they can solve here. So again, the entire witch is just a red herring in this adventure. It's just all about, I guess it's just that cutscene of going to the witch's house and meeting the angel, and then you and the angel go to the lair. And there's things that can happen out of order. Like, you could go to the lair first, and then you have to fight all the cultists, and then it would just say, like, what does it mean? You run this chapter when you're ready to conclude the adventure. So one of the adventures has a corruption score of 5 or higher, so they've just done enough things. Or the adventures are confronting Isolde, or it says the dark powers decide that now is the time. So it's kind of just up to you on when to run the cutscene, which tells me there's not really... it just fails at making kind of an overarching narrative in that way. Like, there is no kind of beginning, middle, and end to this adventure, which is a bummer because it does a really good job of creating an open world, a miniature open world of legitimately interesting locations. And each I'm going back up to the map. Each location has like neat story stuff involved. Like, there's a reason for these things to exist. Like that Grey Garden area with the stone giant was cursed and had this whole backstory. The Vampire Mist has a backstory. The Carnival's got a ton of things going on. Like, all of these are really richly done awesome locations. I just wish there was at least a through line to a more interesting, overarching narrative rather than just, okay, DM, when you feel the time is right, just start the end game. It just feels like a missed opportunity for something a little bit more. But I really love the way this adventure is written and designed and structured. Although I do miss having some decent maps. All right, so quick pros and cons for Widow's Peak. Get back up to the top here. Let's go back all the way to the top. Widow's Peak. It's mostly fog here. All right, we'll go down. So pro, the writing throughout the adventure is evocative and immersive without being verbose, which is something I'm very guilty of being. I just think everything from the DM standpoint of just reading the adventure to the actual flavor text that the DM reads to the players is all extremely well written and gives me those nice mysterious horror vibes without being, it's not like a gory slasher horror, it's that kind of mysterious, unsettling, unknown horror, which I really, really dig. Pro, it has richly thematic random encounters that are more than just monster attacks. I went over at the beginning how it was like a full 2 pages or 3 pages of just pure random encounters that occur across that overland map, and they were just a lot of nice things happening that weren't just simple monster attacks. They were actually flavorful and cool, and some of them were traps, some of them were good things that happened, most of them were bad things. I like that a lot, and I would actually employ quite a bit of those. And plus, the players presumably would be traveling around that map quite a bit, because that's pretty much most of the adventure. And to go along with that, the world map and the isometric dungeon maps look fantastic. This is like the contrast to the con of the fact that I don't like, which I'll get to my cons, but there are no separate grid maps. But the pro is that I do like the isometric maps. I like looking at them. I like that style. Like, my best example is when when Roll20 did Curse of Strahd, they kept the original isometric maps, but they also designed grid battle maps, and that is the best case scenario. You give me the cool isometric map so I can look at them and be like, all right, that's really cool design, I like that, I can get the feel for it, how things look, but you give me that battle map so I can actually use it in the game, which is unfortunately the more important one of the two. Pro, several unique, interesting monster stat blocks, magic items, and new tables for more thematic trinkets and wild magic. I didn't even actually go over that, did I? I need to go all the way down to the bottom. There are a number of unique monsters. The Gull Speaker is probably my favorite because I think that's really neat and really flavorful of the horror seaside thing. There is an entire, here we go, table of wild magic. There's a specific area, or maybe it's Craven Cove in general, that you roll on the wild magic table every time somebody casts a spell, and they're very much taken from the original wild magic table in the player's handbook, but they're more flavorful. So it's got fog cloud and water breathing effects, swarm of gulls. All of these things are more flavorful to this adventure, which I think is cool. And trinkets. There's a lot of places where you can just get trinkets, which I like that as a form of treasure that's sort of meaningless, but also has some good flavor to it. It's kind of like the Storm King's Thunder the treasure in the giant bags, in the giant's bags. Which also really neat. So I like having these appendices full of interesting things. And final pro, a selection of suitably epic ending climaxes to choose from. I like that I have options on how to end the adventure, although I would definitely not use the corruption mechanic for turning a player against each other. I do like the option of leaving it to that celestial turning evil or just the entire plane collapsing. Cons, no separate grid battle maps. Always going to be a con for me. It's a big bummer when the maps are not really functional and usable, although I do like the look and design of the maps and areas here. And there is no big dungeon crawl, so it's not as egregious as, dungeons that don't have usable maps. It's basically tiny things that I would be able to whip up fairly easily. Although I would at least need a usable one of the overland map. I don't know if I even got that. I think it was just had the letters on there, so at least I would need that much to use because I would want to have a token to move my players around on in Roll20. And con, it's really more of a series of events than an overarching narrative. There's not, it does that kind of mini open world design very well, but at the cost of there's not really a good main storyline to follow. In fact, the main storyline, specifically, like, I guess the twist is that there is no big bad witch to defeat that's returned or anything like that. It's just the curse is still active, and whenever you're ready to end the adventure, you start the end game, and that it feels very like there was something missing there, I think. So final verdict. While it uses its fair share of classic horror tropes, Widow's Peak breathes fresh, salty sea air into the genre, by providing a mini world of horror to explore. Thank you for everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work on patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.